why. So that's what we're going to review, and I'm going to kill this. Got it. So I'll kind of skip it ahead anyway. So we'll head to the next slide here. So who am I? You heard my brief intro, told you it was kind of an early intro, but I'm the lead product security engineer at Arthrex for all of our connected devices. And we have devices pretty much to set up a full OR operating room at hospitals that can connect and talk with each other, pass data back and forth. Anything the surgeon needs to help him out, to help you, is a good thing. It makes their job more efficient, and it makes your recovery a lot faster and a lot easier. So that's what I'm helping secure those products, because we don't want anything going wrong in the OR. I worked 22 plus years in various roles in technology, from systems engineering, electronics to IT, in life sciences, between pharmaceuticals and medical devices. I always like when I work for pharmaceuticals to say, uh-oh, there we go. All right. Sorry, I haven't used this hub before. When I work for pharmaceuticals, I always like to say I was a drug dealer for my job, right? And I have had a trunk full of drugs going across states before, and that was an interesting trip. It's like, what am I going to tell the person who pulls me over why I have a trunk load full of drugs? But it was all good. It's all in the up and up. So yeah, I found the Southwest Florida SEC in 2019 when I came down. I moved down from Michigan. Another joke, we moved from the subarctic to the subtropic, and I'm not going back. This is the weather I want to be in. So yeah, we've been going strong for 3 years now. We never stopped our meetups, even during the lockdown. We just transitioned over to virtual. We're still on virtual right now. We may explore going physical, but right now I think what we're going to do is stay virtual for all of our talks. And then for our socials, that's the virtual part, or the physical part that we're doing. And thanks to Daniel for finding that Hopsize Brewery, making that suggestion. They are a great location here in Bonita Springs. Not here, this is Fort Myers. Over in Bonita Springs, they are a craft brewery, and it doesn't matter if you drink or not, come out and hang out with us. It's informal, just sitting around chit-chatting. Get away from work, get away from home for a while. I was also granted the OWASP Bonita Springs charter in 2020, right before we locked down. So that chapter hasn't grown too much, but we are starting to see some growth now as things are starting to pick up. We meet regularly the first Tuesday of the first month of each quarter. And there's a lot to remember there. So just check out our meetup page or our OWASP page, and we'll always post our information there about when our next meetup is coming. So this is kind of an off-schedule meetup, but Zarella, thanks to her, gave me the option to come out and talk about this subject, which I've been doing quite a bit of research on and projects related to it. And knowing that what its benefits are going to be for the whole industry, it's worth learning a bit about. So, let's see, can I go backwards? There we go. I'm on socials as well. There's just 2 of my socials right there. If you want to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, feel free to reach out. All right, so now we're getting to the presentation. This is what everybody's here for, hopefully. So what is an SBOM, right? Software bill of materials. And I picked up some photos here to kind of give an example, get away from code development for a moment, and just kind of conceptualize the idea of what a bill of materials is. And I thought, like, this is a good thing to pull on Forrest Gump and his mama, right? Where, you know, she was telling him life is like a box of chocolates, right? You never know what you're going to get. And that problem is, it exists in software too. We're not writing just lines of code by ourselves now. You know, we're writing lines of code with the help of other people. We're standing on people's shoulders. We're reusing. We're not reinventing the wheel much of the time. We're pulling in libraries, third-party apps, and stuff like that. We're reaching out to APIs all over that we don't even own to get our software put together and get it marketed, right? So this box of chocolates, you can see the variety in there. You know, this chocolate right here may be your code. What's the rest of the chocolates doing there? Are those chocolates poison? I don't want to eat another piece of chocolate if it's poison, right? I want to enjoy my chocolate. So, you know, the idea of software bill of materials is becoming big because we want to know as consumers what's in the software that we're getting. Are we getting something that's safe? Are we getting something that's going to cause us to get ransomware? or somebody use our computer as a bot in the bot network, or some other malicious activity, just steal our IDs, right? And you can see down here, like, again, just the sorted creams, right? This is the ingredients. And we talk about may contain peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, you know, all the different allergies that we have to put on food labeling now. This is just like software too. What's the danger of software? What's the danger of the components that we're reusing in our software every time we create a product? So why do we need it? So I already explained some of the dangers through the chocolates, right? We don't want poisonous chocolate. Executive order was signed last year by President Biden in May. And within that executive order, it's mentioned twice now, software bill of materials is going to be needed. It's going to be required to explain what the components are in our software and secure our third-party supply chains within our software. And then from NTIA, who took on the task of researching and putting stuff together, CISA is now taking it over. If you look around, you might come across something called CISA SBOM. Little play on words there. They got some working groups going on now too. So if you're interested in contributing to the standards that they're putting together for requirements for SBOMs, check that out, go to CISA's page. But in the NTIA's report, they talk about the administration, I'm going to quote it here, administration notes in the executive order, the trust we place in our digital infrastructure should be proportional to how trustworthy and transparent that infrastructure is. So think about that for a moment. We buy that box of chocolates off the shelf and we feel pretty good about it, buying it, that it's going to be safe, that we're not going to get food poisoning, that we know if we have food allergies, it's going to be on that label. So we know not to eat the one with the nuts in it if you're allergic to nuts, right? But yet we use software every day of our lives. Every one of you today probably has something with you that has software on it. And we don't think twice about it. You get in your car, you drive down the road. Car has software. Traffic lights have software. The road itself might have software in it. We're getting smart cities, smart grid too, right? Every day our life is impacted by software. Why can't we have transparency in our software so that we can know it's safe? Oh, I went too fast in that one. So what's the impacts when we have to do it, when we're being told we're gonna need software bill of materials? So right now it impacts federal agencies. They're gonna be required to produce it for any of their projects. If they're creating a software-based product or project, they're gonna have to produce an SBOM that goes along with it. Same thing for companies or individuals who are dealing directly with federal agencies. Those agencies are gonna be asking for that SBOM. Be ready for it. It's coming. If you're not already being asked for it. I know we are. And that goes to my third line, regulated industries, and I'm playing around with this hub again. Regulated industries, such as those that fall under the FDA, which medical device manufacturing does, may, and I got that little asterisk there, may be required to produce and maintain for their products. I say may, because right now it's a guidance. So us as a medical device manufacturer, it's in our guidances. It says before we go to market, we should have an SBOM as part of our submission process to get approved to market. And post-market, we should maintain that SBOM. If we do patches and stuff like that, we got to update the SBOM as well. But it's only a guidance. Excuse me. It's only a guidance right now, which means we don't have to follow it. And I didn't even touch it this time. Step over here. Anyway, it's only guidance right now, which means we don't have to follow it. It's not a law. But recently, within the past couple of months, there's been legislation that's been introduced. It's in draft right now. It's waiting for comments, and it'll likely go through. And the four main pieces on that legislation is for the FDA. So I'm speaking towards that last bullet point. For the FDA, they want teeth in this game. They want to be able to enforce that guidance, not just say, yeah, it's good if you have it, but you don't really need it, right? They want to say, no, you have to have it. Medical device is, the cybersecurity for medical devices is so important that the FDA now equates patient safety to security. And that's reflected in the bill they're trying to introduce now. It's going to require us to have an SBOM. It's going to require us to do vulnerability management, ongoing monitoring in the post-market. And if anybody else in life sciences has a product, a software that has an uncontrolled risk that gets discovered, the FDA will now consider that an adulterated product, which means you get to be on their front page. You're their favorite person at that point. It's not good to be there, not good to be on the front page of the FDA or any other regulatory agency for that matter. And adulterated products, that used to be saved or reserved for drugs. Because think about it, you take a drug, you can't take it back. The drug's internal, right? That's damaging. You don't want that. Now they're saying even medical devices, if you have an uncontrolled risk in a medical device, that's adulterated as well. All right. Some of the reasons this is coming up into the forefront, SBOM's been around for years, but now you're going to start hearing about it being talked about a lot more. These are the reasons. Some of these you'll recognize, maybe all of them you'll recognize. Log4j in the news December, right? That was Christmas weekend, hits the news. And then everybody's scrambling. People are still scrambling to fix that one. NPM colors and faker. If you're using Node, you might have heard about this one. The maintainer, the author of those libraries got fed up, decided to go sabotage his own libraries. So you can't even trust the maintainer of those libraries you're using in your own software. Spring for Shell, another one that came up recently. Remote code execution on that one. It didn't hit the news as hard as Log4j, kind of fizzled, but it's out there. And because of remote code execution, it is a danger. And these are all from third-party libraries, things that we would implement in our products. What's the value? Good old Tom Cruise, right? Show me the money. That's what we want to know about. Why do we need to do more work? You're telling me to do more work, but I don't get my chance to, hands on the keyboard programming, right? Not doing the fun stuff. This is work. Why should I do it? Especially if you're a small shop. If you're an independent by yourself, this is a lot more work then, right? Show me the money. Why should I do it? Other than being told I need to do it, right? Where's the value for me? Where's the value for my company? Asset management, it's a hard thing. Anybody in IT will tell you that. If they tell you it's not hard, they're lying. Asset management's hard thing. Think about that inside your software now. If you have a big complex software project, asset management is all those libraries and third-party dependencies and their dependencies and title of this talk, BOMs all the way down. Because it's not only about the dependencies and libraries that you're using, what about those maintainers and the ones that they're pulling in to create their library too? So it just keeps down, 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 BOMs all the way down. Asset management, know what you have. Leads in license management as well. We're using open source libraries all the time. Again, stepping on those Solar's giants, right? We're pulling stuff in and using it because it's free, because it's easy, because it's been done and we don't want to rewrite it ourselves. Or we're pulling in paid for proprietary libraries. That's happening too, right? But at least when we're paying for something, we pay attention generally to the licensing. When we're not paying for stuff, we don't pay attention to the licensing as much. We should, because that'll get you into trouble. If you're pulling in open source projects into your product that you're going to sell, there are licenses. If you sell and you have their library in your product, now you have to open source your product too. Welcome to open source. Thanks for contributing. If you're going to go buy a company or you're being acquired by a company, due diligence, look at what licenses is in their products that you're buying, because you may be buying something you don't want. Again, more value, vulnerability management. You're pulling in those libraries like the NPM faker, right? You want to know if there's a vulnerability, because when you sell your product, you want to sell your product to be a secure product. Your consumers are going to love you for that. As soon as you get on the front page news, as soon as you're on Twitter, Wall Street Journal, wherever, your customers are leaving. They're going to go to your competitor. Vulnerability management is key here. So having that SBOM is going to help you keep track of those vulnerabilities, because the SBOM is going to be machine ingestible to software that tracks vulnerabilities. That's tracking it against the National Vulnerability Database, the NVD, or other databases out there that can alert you as soon as it knows about a vulnerability being filed. And then you can take action. You can do your risk management, the next part of it. Is this vulnerability impacting me? Is it impacting my software? Is it going to be impacting my customers? Or is it something that's not impacting? We don't have to call every line of code that's in something, right? So maybe it's a piece of code that we never call. So we can say, oh, it's not impacting, so there's no risk there. Or it's the other way around, it's high risk. We need to issue a mitigation right away. We need to issue that emergency patch instead of waiting for Patch Tuesday. What's an SBOM look like? What's in an SBOM? Right, we talked about what's the value, why we're doing it, what's actually in it. NTIA defined, so I got to count, 7 fields as a minimum. Now there'll be some agencies may require more of it. If you're a global company or making a product that's going to be sold globally, you may find that other people, other countries, other regulatory agencies, other governmental agencies may require more. This is the base minimum, these 7 fields. Who made the SBOM? When did they make it? That's you, right? When did you make that SBOM? What version of the product was it for? And then what's the components? So going from your product to now, what's the components in your product? What are their versions? Maybe hash them, give them a unique fingerprint too. Who is the author of those components or the vendor, the supplier? Now keep track of that. I think I said, what's the version? And then at the end, what's the timestamp of the whole SBOM being assembled? Because you may have multiple components to your product and you're pulling in more than one SBOM too. So trying to put it all together, wrap it up nice and neat, be human readable and machine readable. So what are some of the formats out there? Again, getting back to NTIA. If you want to learn more about this, check out NTIA's page. They've got pages and pages of stuff on SBOM because of this project. So I'm always going to be referencing them. But SPDX, Software Package Data Exchange, is one of the formats. These 3 formats, the accepted formats right now, the recommended ones. They did say, though, they realize that other formats may be out there, other formats may be created. They're not locking anybody into these formats. They said these are the 3 they recommend. SPDX recently became a standard. 2021, I think it was August or September, they got their ISO standard number. Fantastic, we got a standard now. Anybody ever see the XKCD comic? Does anybody read XKCD? Yeah. Okay, there's a comic out there that they did about standards. If you're not familiar with it, look it up, XKCD standards. There's 14 standards. We don't like the standards, so we're going to create one of our own. Next year, there's 15 standards, and the next person is creating another one, right? So I always joke when it comes up to standards. So SPDX is great for license management. It hits all the basic needs that NTI had in that table previously that I showed. It was built for license management. Not to say it can't do anything else, but it's going to be its specialty. Cyclone DX, OWASP flagship project. I'm going to hype that one up because I got my OWASP chapter. I know some folks on the phone, like Corey is in OWASP. It's a great project. It was built from the ground up to be scalable, to be vulnerability management centric as well, and to the point where it can contain vulnerability exchange format in it, or VEX, and it can contain SPDX within it. It can be extensible. So it's a really great SBOM format. So I would completely promote that one. I'm promoting it inside Arthrex right now, that we use that one. And then there's, oh yeah, and it doesn't have it's not recognized as a standard though. It doesn't have ISO, it doesn't have ANZ or anything like that. But it's OWASP. And so it's got the name behind it. It's a flagship project. They're not going anywhere. A lot of tools are being developed around it, whether they're proprietary or free and open source. You can go to their tools page. There's a ton of stuff out there already. Software identification tags, or SWID. It's been around for a while. That's the IEC or other ISO that you can see there in 2015. Another standard you can take and use. There we go. So how do we map them? So there on the left, we had the fields from NTIA, and we can see just across the board, if we choose SPDX, SWID, Cyclone DX, how do the fields in each one of those formats map out? And so we could show that any of them support NTIA and what the feds are doing. So did I go too far? Okay. So what does an SBOM look like? It's got to be human readable, machine readable, because not only are you going to be wanting to monitor it for vulnerabilities with some type of vulnerability management software, your customers are going to want to too. They're going to ask for it. They're going to ingest it into their cybersecurity team and watch on the vulnerabilities of their side. You don't want them telling you first that you have a vulnerability, so you want to stay on top of that. It's never fun when you have an external researcher, customer, Twitter tell you have a vulnerability. So, but machine readable, so there's an advantage there. And it's usually going to be found in XML or JSON. CSV and other formats are available as well. Internally, we're trying to use JSON. Most tools are compatible with JSON. So, but yeah, so it's a familiar formats already, and I can't see too well on the screen. But right from the top, it talks about, okay, what standard did we use? Did we use SWIDS, SPDX, CycloneDX? What version of it did we use? We need that for the machine, because then the machine's going to know how to ingest it, right? And then from there, it's the application. Whose application? What version? And then from there, it's the packages. What's the packages in that application? And that's how it just breaks it down all the way. Actually, that might be the end. I am not getting anywhere, so I'm going to call that's the end. Any questions, David?
So you had mentioned, I think you had mentioned like a lack of quality for training this. I guess what to clarify, is this a training issue for professionals who know about it? So is this something that I could further in the institution I work at, or is this something that's more grounded in the whole system?
That's a good question. So for those who didn't hear the question, David was asking, is this putting SBOMs together, doing the vulnerability management, is it a training issue? Is it a academic issue for students in schools coming out into the workforce? Is it a quality issue? Like, where's the issue reside in the creation and maintenance of these? Yeah, from my opinion, I have never seen this taught in a school, putting an SBOM together. And so somebody who's going to be an entry level, a junior position, likely isn't going to do this. Hopefully they are working in a shop. If they're working for a company, they're working in a shop with DevOps, and it could be something that's inserted in the pipeline. There are tools out there that can automate this. So it'd be a matter of working with the either higher level senior developers or working with your DevOps team to put the tools in to generate the SBOM, and then from there, ingesting it into your vulnerability management system. From a training aspects, yeah, somebody has to learn about it. I mean, SBOM, the concept of SBOM has been around for a while. You may hear people call it soup. So if you like soup, it's software of unknown provenance. So now it's being matured into SBOM or software bill of materials, because we got to have bombs for everything. Relating it to cars, Carlos, you said you were in cars. Just think about a dashboard. You got your dashboard. What else is on a dashboard though? You got your gauge cluster. What's in the gauge cluster? Speedometer. What's in the speedometer? It could be the old type of speedometer where it's gears and needles. It could be a newer one where it's computerized, chips and solder, right? All that's BOM. All that's BOM, and all that's bill of materials. How do we make a product? So it's mature on the manufacturing side of things, not so mature on software side of things. So as an industry, we just need to mature. We need to work this into our tooling, work into our CI/CD pipelines. If we don't have that, work it into our SDLC, put the tooling in to be able to create these items, and then have somebody doing security that can do the vulnerability management. Best thing is not have your developers do it, because they're already busy enough. Right? Most of us are 100% taxed in our jobs, just the way of things, right? If you're adding another portal or another application that I have to hop into to get my job done, I'm not being productive. So make it so it fits in your SDLC, make it so it fits in your CI/CD. Good?
Oh, perfect. I had a follow-up question. So this should fall into like the SDLC lifecycle. From what I've been seeing with cybersecurity trends, they're trying to implement these kind of concepts of testing into earlier phases, like phase 2 with requirements. Is that recommended for implementing the software bill of materials, or is this something later after you architect something?
Interestingly, so the follow-up question was about implementation, how early we implement this in our life cycles. The interesting thing is, up until last week, I would have said that release candidates where you implement this at. And then last week, sitting in some talks, the light bulb goes off about maybe we should be running this earlier. The whole shift left concept, right? Don't wait until the very end when you're about to have a release. You got your release candidate all buttoned up, you got approval to push it out. You run it through, you run your SBOM, you run it through your vulnerability management tool, and you've got a critical, right? You not want to, now all of a sudden you're shutting down your release candidate, you're not releasing, you're not meeting schedules. So getting it earlier in the process is worth checking out. Even if it's not going to be your final SBOM, like just, if you've got it automated, why not? Keep generating it, keep ingesting it up until the very end, and then make your clean, do your freeze. Here's our clean SBOM. Here's a clean scan, push it out. I think this next.
I don't control the library they use, but I still like.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where the SBOM strength comes in. It's not so much keeping track of the code that you're writing for your product. It's the track that the libraries, the standard libraries that you're pulling in as part of your product, it's tracking those.
My job is working based on create myself.
Right. Yeah, so if you have a vulnerability in something like Python, so say I'm going to pick on Anessa, right? Is if you have a vulnerability in NumPy, and we'll say pi is no longer 3.14595 whatever, right? It's now it's just 3.5. That's going to be an issue. That brings us back to the days of Excel and Pentium, right? If anybody's old enough to remember that. Yeah, how do you get something fixed that's not in your control? So reaching out to the maintainers and saying, hey, are you aware of this vulnerability? How soon are you going to mitigate it? How soon are you going to patch it? Like working with the maintainers is going to be, it's going to be needed. And certainly there's going to be those orphan projects out there that aren't being maintained any longer. Look for a new library. If they're not being maintained, don't use them. That's a risk. So yeah, that's going to be a hard problem, especially for maintainers of these standard libraries. Yeah.
There's a bunch of Python libraries that are and I go across all sorts of stuff all the time that says don't use this because such and
Right. So
I would like to defense design in Python based in Southwest Florida. I just returned from Python US in Salt Lake City, and one of the talks that Eric and I attended was the presentation by Dustin Ingram, who is the director of PSF, the Python Foundation. He also is the senior engineer at Google. It's a newly formed team that is main focus is to make Python more secure. I can share on Slack the presentation. I think it's over. So there's a strong commitment in the Python community to make Python more secure as language, because I understand that some of the dangers can be at the kernel level. I also want to follow up on that. We also need to understand that most of these open source libraries are created by volunteers. So demanding them to keep them secure, it's somewhat unfair. And if a commercial entity, especially an entity that is regulated by FDA, wants to report it to be secure, perhaps they could find resources on their team to fix those vulnerabilities, and that way to contribute to open source, to the libraries that they use to build I absolutely agree. If you're not comfortable with the open source library that you use it.
Yeah, or take up maintenance of it. You know, pick up an orphan product or orphan project and start being the maintainer. I mean, we're all using open source in our products, and we're dependent on people who are doing this. A lot of them are doing it as volunteers, like I said. Some places are trying to help monetize that. GitHub has a program now to help monetize people's projects where you can donate money to them. I'm glad you called out the Python program, right, that they're going to do to be more secure, especially after the PyPy incident and stuff.
Okay, so Google is obviously one of the tech companies that probably previously using open source, and they're putting money now to make the open source more secure. And just for those of you who are in data science, I work as a experience in Format, which is a foundational library, data science, numerical analysis with Python. And as of today, we have one software engineer working on maintenance of the library. We have estimated between 10 to 20 million users. And we have only one software engineer. And that grant expires at the end of October. And one of my many jobs is scrambling to fundraise to find us another grant, maybe with NASA, maybe with NSF, to have at least one engineer keep going and maintaining the library.
You got to follow up?
First, that's one thing. I've heard of it, but I kind of understand two things, including software development wise on a new data file. You know, that come up with like if you're gonna first time you're selling the product, you're coming out with legal or something like this. Somebody will come with legal and hey, we sell it, you have to make sure you have these where that is your kind of experience, or if you know ahead of time when you took the solar product,
Yeah, so if I understand your correction, or if I understand your question correctly, as a person who's producing a product, how do I know when I need to produce the SBOM? So yeah, at least with the FDA, and I mean, I'm going to lean on that because where my experience is at. With the FDA, it's required as part of their pre-market submissions. So before you even market it, before the FDA gives you that permission to market it, it's going to be included in your submission to them as part of the cybersecurity section of that submission. And then they're going to review it and they'll come back with any questions or clarifications needed.
So we're kind of done with kind of that packages, like download packages, internal server, and we mark that version. That's more of a security. Also, more about how you implement. When you build, when you build for that software, you have some other pipeline to protect the things instead of actually also you will need to build one process. So it looks like it's more of a visible tech, but that's one more using very limited other information.
Yeah, so when you think about, back in the SDLC, right, is part of your development lifecycle, the SBOM is that collection. So I like what you said, what you're doing is a good practice, is bringing down and actually auditing what you're using. Just like we audit our suppliers, audit our vendors, we should audit the packages we're using too, and then freezing them and say, we're going to use this version until maybe something is announced that we become aware and then upgrade, right? And then we've seen that if you look at, I think it was over the past year before. I'd have to go back and look. You can probably find it on Bleeping Computer, where a researcher showed that for some large companies, even in the FANG, were doing their nightly builds or any other build, everything was automated. And anytime it detected a new version out on GitHub or any other repository, it was pulling it into that build. And then the researcher was able then to poison that, as part of the research, they were able to poison that library, create a new version of it.
Yeah, we can, when we do the bill, so I'll pull up the effect or whatever. But that's why we have internal servers of the bill and our own server. Pull up that there. For security,
Yeah, more of
it's
a,
up to you guys.
yeah, definitely good practice though, to pull things down, inspect them yourself, run your tools on them. I mean, SBOM is only be one part of all those tools in your chain, because like the things you talked about, software component analysis, your SCA tools, your SAS tools, DAST, all the alphabet, right? You're gonna have all those tools doing your testing of the code and coming back and pointing out where maybe your own developers have produced something that may be a vulnerability, right? But as far as knowing if there's a vulnerability for the libraries you're pulling down, you know, doing your audits where possible, you know, freezing on versions, those are good practices, but also having that SBOM so that you can be, not only you, but your customers can all be aware if a vulnerability gets announced, that ongoing monitoring that's happening of those packages because of the SBOM is going to be an advantage. Yeah.
So I have one comment and one question. I guess comment. Outside of the security applications of this, I think we could probably all agree that this is just good software development practice. So you don't end up with an unsupported component of your software stack. So outside of security updates, there may be issues with support, like you're basically, for example, licensing support from a vendor for a particular software version. If you don't have something like this, there's no way for you to know what you have in your environment. So it could be that a software provider sunsets a version of a component that you own, and outside of the security risk, you're going to be unsupported for perhaps a critical piece of software in your application that you don't even know exists.
Sure.
So I think it's also worth highlighting like that aspect outside of security. And I had a question about, especially now with containers, how do Docker or Kubernetes images, I guess, apply to this concept now? Because there, instead of like adding layers of libraries, you're adding layers of images of the Docker container. So does that also become in scope of this, like all the Docker images that you use and all the Docker images that make up the images that you use and all the way down?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, simple answer is yes. And there are already tools that are developed for it, which is great. Kubernetes has a specific tool for building SBOMs already. It's well tested, it's already mature. There's a product out there, I forget who the developer is called, it's called Tern, T-E-R-N, is another one for containers. Let's see, do you know about it? Okay. That's another one for containers to develop SBOMs for, because certainly we've seen already breakout security issues with containers themselves and the software that's used within them. Not only like you're putting your application in there, right? But what else do you have in there that's supporting that application? So, I mean, all the way down to I like what you said, the containers of containers, or the containers history could certainly be an issue. And the containers history isn't going to show up in an SBOM, but kind of getting sidetracked on that one. But yes, simple question or simple answer is, yeah, containers will have to have their SBOM. So if your product is being sold as a containerized product, you're going to have your SBOM for your application. You're going to also have that next SBOM where I talked earlier how you got to collect all your SBOMs at the end. You're going to have that other SBOM that talks about the container. What's your architecture? How did you put it together? What's the supporting software for it? Because certainly there could be vulnerabilities in Docker and Kubernetes and I forget what Linux is called, LXD or whatever for Linux. So yeah, good question. Anybody else? Yeah, so Corey commented, thanks Corey, 1000% SBOMs and SBOMs. So bombs all the way down, hence the title. Yeah, so we were talking earlier about the FDA. So part of the pre-market submissions, this is a requirement. The Corey brings up one of the interesting challenges the federal mandate brings is that developers and companies who service the government not only need to produce an SBOM once, but for every new release. It's absolutely correct. So if you issue a patch, you're issuing a new SBOM. Your patch is likely going to have changed something within your software, whether it's a version number of your software itself, which is captured at the top of the SBOM, or you're using part of their patches as to pull in a new library, replace an old library, whatever. You're going to likely be generating SBOM. There may be small kind of edge cases where your code doesn't change anything, but I would question why you wouldn't be changing the version number of your code if you're issuing, even if it's that fourth dot out or whatever, if you're using semantic versioning. With dev shops, moving towards DevOps and faster release cadences, the challenge of producing SBOMs for every release requires enhanced processes and automated tooling to support the requirement. Yeah, automation is going to be key here. The tools are being built for it, which is good. Cyclone DX, getting back to that project, on their tools page, there's a lot of ones that they've already uploaded to GitHub that are being maintained that are for different languages, whether you're in the Python, in the Node, the mess of Node, or other languages, .NET. I don't see Ron here. C#, any kind of stuff like that. There's likely already a tool to generate the SBOM that you can insert right into your automated pipeline.
In terms of SBOM automation, is this something that the industry leaders are typically developing in-house, or is there like a leading third-party tool or company that does this kind of service? Ideally, I can see it being better in-house.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So for those online that didn't hear it, how's the tooling being created? Is it being done in-house? Is it commercial? Is it open source? Just a second. And then, for me, I can't answer that question because the only research that I'm doing is looking outside of the company. I'm not looking to do it in-house. I think other people can do it better.
I was thinking like there's some shops, they don't have like a standard library to use, like, they put a new library that is full, they can use something. Hey, this is what I want to do. Right now, we're going to go out first. If we just do our own code stuff, I think a library, don't be that. We're not really looking at what it does, like, and making sure that we don't get original. I guess that's kind of the point, like, trust the author, we're going to do that library.
Right. Yeah, so I think I can say how we're doing it is that in our build, we've got a variety of different pipelines that we use. So think of like Bitbucket from Atlassian, right? The tools certainly fit into Bitbucket without any issues. You can get the plugins for it, or I've seen some of the OWASP Cyclone tools that have been developed, Cyclone DX tools have been developed, even have the command line, the CLI. So even if you can't exactly plug it into the tool, if the tool you're using can call command line, you can do it via that way too. It looked like you had a question. Anything else? All right, so I'll stop the sharing here.